How y'all doing?
And it is a blizzard out there. You ain't lying, Molly.
You're not in L.A. anymore, Max. Let's get into it, gentlemen. A lot to get into, as Stephen A. told you. So there's three sides to every story, right? Her side, his side, and the truth. That's the case for the New York Knickerbockers, where the drama continued last night. Former Knick Charles Oakley was involved in a physical altercation at the team's home game against the Clippers. Madison Square Garden security escorted Oakley out of the stands, and the Knicks said Oakley was arrested by NYPD. He was seen shoving MSG security near team owner James Dolan. Oakley was released from jail early Thursday morning.
What happened, me and four friends went to the game tonight to watch the Knicks and the Clippers. Get there, sit down, try to have a good time. Next thing I know, I was asked to leave the building. I asked why. And he said, guys, well, you have to leave because someone ordered you to leave. And I'm like, I've been here 4.5 minutes. I'm a Knicks fan. Played here for 10 years. I love the Knicks. I love New York. I don't know why I'm not welcome into the Garden. Phil came in the back. Spike Lee was in the back. Phil, like, what happened? I said, Phil, I just got here 4.5 minutes ago. What could I do in 4.5 minutes? But things happen. I'm a grown man. I can fight my battle. I'm a guy who tell the truth. I don't have to lie about nothing. You know, I'm an honest guy.
Here we go. The New York Post sports page never disappoints. Nicked off. Stephen A., you were there at the Garden. What is your reaction to this Oakley incident?
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate for all parties concerned. And, you know, even though Oakley has his reasons, the reality is he doesn't look good in this equation. You know, you're 6'9", you're 250 pounds easy. I mean, he's built like just a chiseled brick house. This is a hardcore dude. And, you know, you have a reputation as being an enforcer on the NBA court, but also off of it. And you're seen pushing individuals who happen to be security, Garden personnel, law enforcement officials, or what have you. Thank God it didn't end up being worse than it actually could have been. So in that regard, Oakley does not look good. In the case of the New York Knicks, here was their side of things. Their attitude was like Charles Oakley was conducting himself in a belligerent fashion, so he ultimately had to be forcibly removed and was ultimately arrested because he was spewing some stuff in the direction of Chairman James Dolan and others, and it just could not be tolerated. I spoke to Charles Oakley, Max, 1:30 this morning, and at that time he said to me, I'm guilty of all of that, but it was after they approached me to remove me from the game and ultimately forcibly removed me. He said that was when I was losing it. Before that, I had not said a word. I had arrived at the arena. I was in the seat area for approximately 4 to 4.5 minutes. I never said a word to Mr. Dolan. I never said a word to anybody. I saw Mr. Dolan turn around, see me there, and then a minute later, all I see are a bunch of security and MSG personnel and others come over to me to tell me that I needed to leave the game. I got a ticket. I'm a fan like anybody else. I should be allowed to be at the game to watch the Knicks play, especially if I had a ticket and a seat. And he said, and I don't think it was right that I was removed. So that was his version. It differs from the New York Knicks because the New York Knicks say that he was removed after he was conducting himself in a certain fashion. He's saying that he only lost it when they approached him for no reason and told him that he had to leave the game. Those are two different versions. What it comes down to is who do you believe? And it's hard, and I think it's sort of, you know, I don't want to say it's irresponsible because everybody has their opinion. I've known Oakley for 20 years. The man's not a liar. He's always straight up. I mean, he's straight up, and everybody knows he's straight up because he's absolutely, positively fearless when it comes to expressing himself in any way he so chooses. He's not worried about how anybody else feels. The flip side to it is that the New York Knicks and Ian Begley are saying that they had people who were witnesses who did hear him going off on James Dolan before security personnel arrived. Phil Jackson ultimately got out of the seat, went into the tunnel, tried to calm him down, at which time he was going off, going ballistic about James Dolan, so much so that my sources told me Phil Jackson reached out to Michael Jordan and asked Michael Jordan to try and calm him down. But by that time, the police had had enough and had placed him under arrest and removed him from Madison Square Garden. That's the story.
Well, yeah, if you show up with a fighting spirit to Madison Square Garden, they immediately eject you and arrest you. I mean, that's the code of competition for the New York Knicks. I don't think Oakley looks bad here, and normally I would. I'd flip on a player who did that or a person who did that. You don't comport yourself that way as an adult. You don't put your hands on other adults. But let's look at what just happened, really. Molly said his side, her side, and the truth. Let's look at his side first. That'd be Charles Oakley. His side is that he didn't say anything to Dolan before security approached him. You just said you've known Charles Oakley for a long time, known him to be an honest guy. That's his reputation. Any Knicks fan or basketball fan who remembers Charles Oakley, that dude put in an honest day's work every single day. I remember him talking about being a basketball player is no different than being a farmer. You get up before the sun comes up, you work all day, and you go to sleep. I mean, that was Charles Oakley. So Charles Oakley is credible. This is not a guy who looks for shortcuts or the easy way out or makes up stories. He doesn't feel he has to, because when you work like that and leave it all on the line, you have no reason to make up stories. And so I find Charles Oakley credible. So if he's not cursing out Dolan beforehand, let's say fans and others have said he was being boisterous. I don't know. It's a Knicks game, not a ballet. So, okay, he feels he's comporting himself within the norms of Madison Square Garden behavior. I tend to believe that. If security comes and starts to, this is the attitude actually the Knicks need, and this is very much a New York attitude. If you're comporting yourself within social norms, and some other people put their hands on you against your will, guess what's going to happen? Get your hands off of me. And so Charles Oakley's not the type of person where you can just put your hands on him for no reason with impunity. It's not going to happen. That's actually some of the fighting spirit this Knicks team needs. That's if it's Oakley's point of view. That's his side. What about her side? James Dolan and the New York Knicks. They said that he was cursing Dolan out. That's not okay. If you're loudly and repeatedly using bad language in family entertainment setting, that's not okay. There could be kids there. It's a later game, but still, it's adults too. They don't want to hear that. But what if he's saying something like Dolan sucks or Dolan stinks, to clean it up a little bit? Well, that's true. I mean, any Knicks fan would tell you that's true. And if you're the owner of the New York Knicks and you show up publicly to a game and you have the miserable track record that James Dolan does, don't forget, this is the James Dolan who, when the Rockettes didn't want to perform for that Trump event, James Dolan said, well, some Rockette brought up, are you saying we should be tolerant of intolerance? And James Dolan said, yes, I guess that's what I am saying. Well, guess what, James Dolan? You should be tolerant of intolerance toward you, because you're a miserable owner and most Knicks fans hate you. And that includes Charles Oakley. So when you say Oakley looks bad here, if he was in fact cursing Dolan out in front of everybody repeatedly, loudly, and then he put his hands on security, that's bad. But if he's sitting there minding his business, and three goons come to put their hands on him at the behest of the owner who just doesn't like his presence, even though he's a ticket holder and a Knicks legend, by the way, then Oakley doesn't look bad. And in fact, right now, New York is rallying around Charles Oakley.
They can rally around him all they want to. I would even rally around him because he's my friend. But that doesn't mean he's right. Those people who approached him are employees. One or two of them were law enforcement officials. They come up to you and they ask you to leave. You don't put your hands on them because they're telling you you have to go. If they're telling you have to go, what I'm saying to you is...
Are they putting their hands on him, though?
No. They were telling him he needed to go and he wouldn't go. And so as a result, you saw the video on what transpired. And I'm saying to you that, again, I believe that if Oakley's version of the story is correct, and I certainly have never known him to lie about anything, then he is right to be furious. He is right to go off about Dolan. But there is no justification for him pushing security away from him when they've asked him to leave and he refuses to leave, because that's their job.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know what the law says there. I hear what you're saying, but if you're a ticket holder who hasn't done anything wrong, then the truth really matters here. What actually happened matters. Because if you haven't done anything wrong, and you're holding a ticket, and the owner just doesn't like your presence and orders security to physically
Max,
remove
that's not the point.
Then someone has put their hands on you.
No, Max. If you are being asked to leave by law enforcement officials and guard and security, you have to go. No matter how unfair it is.
It's a police officer. If it's a police officer, that's a different story. But if it's guard and security, I think you have the right to say, why do I have to leave? And just because is not a good answer.
I'm really trying to get to a bigger point, bro. What I'm trying to say to you is this. One element that makes him look very bad is that just leave, argue, but leave and deal with it another day. Your life is not going to be over. Think about it this way. What if the law enforcement official had taken the liberty to taser him? It would have been perfectly within his right to do so once Oakley pushed them. You have to take those things into consideration and think about larger ramifications.
Law enforcement's a different story, of course.
Well, again, but guard and officials and law enforcement officials were all there, so it's not separate and apart. It's all encompassing. Number two, we have to take into account a big situation, and I don't know the answer to this question. Was Oakley given a criminal trespass warning prior to the game? I did not ask him that question last night. He was still heated when we spoke at 1:30 in the morning. And to be quite honest with you, Max, I was too damn sleepy. But it is what it is. That's what happened. Because here's what we have to ask ourselves. Those charges that were placed against him, one was criminal trespass. And I'm told that there's no way that he would have been approached by security, by law enforcement officials, if there had not been a prior warning. The issue, though, is I reached out to the Knicks organization this morning, and they informed me that they were not aware of, sending him any letters telling him that he was not welcomed at the Garden or anything like that. So if he hadn't received a prior letter, then that wouldn't be applicable. But if he had received that, and he still showed up at the Garden anyway, then it's perfectly within their right to remove him as well. So this gets a bit more convoluted.
I want to talk about that. In terms of the letter of the law, that's one thing. What the rules are in terms of how you have to respond to security, etc., in an arena, that's one thing. I'm talking about how people will view this right or wrong, morally, ethically. Look, if Oakley is sitting there minding his business, and Dolan doesn't like his presence and sends, we're not talking about law enforcement, just guard and security over there to tell him to leave for no reason other than he doesn't like his presence, then Oakley has a right to tell someone, or not has a right, then people will feel that Oakley is within his kind of human rights to say, do not put your hands on me. People will rally behind Oakley for having that kind of fighting spirit. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm a paying customer. I'm not going anywhere. Don't put your hands on me. That's one. Two, we all know that Oakley is upset because the Knicks are celebrating their 70th year, and he's not included, and he blames Dolan, which he's right about because he's been vocally, publicly critical of a miserable organization and a terrible owner in James Dolan, and he's feeling a certain kind of way about that. And in both cases, whoever has the right to do it, whatever the letter of the law is, the way the fans will see this, especially in New York, is Oakley is in the right and Dolan is in the wrong. That's the way it's being received, and that's the response of the fans right now, and I understand it.
Yeah, but at the same time, again, Dolan is a billionaire who does not care. He's an individual that, for the most part, doesn't give a damn about how people think. As long as they're sitting there and they're walking through those turnstiles and they're watching the Knicks games, and the Knicks as an organization is making money, he's going to be just fine. And at the end of the day, no matter how bad he could potentially end up looking in all of this, if the truth comes out and we find out that Oakley never said a word to him, never bothered him, never spewed any expletives in his direction, and he just decided that he didn't want Oakley at the game, period, no matter how bad that makes Dolan look, what we have to own is the fact that you can't do what Oakley did to security, to a law enforcement official, or people like you just can't do something like that. If you're the commissioner, Adam Silver, you're going to look up things in relation to Oakley's history. Now, this is my man. I love this brother. He's an enforcer for a reason, though. Patrick Ewing is going into the Hall of Fame one day because of Charles Oakley, because you knew that if you did anything wrong to Patrick Ewing. Charles Oakley was going to deal with you, not just on the court, but if he spotted you in the street somewhere. It's the kind of dude that he is. Charles Oakley is a true rough rider extraordinaire. That's who he is. It is not an act. It is not something that is confined to the basketball court. It is who he is. If you're Adam Silver, who was in attendance last night, who saw what everybody else saw, that's a blemish on the NBA to some degree, to be associated with that kind of stuff, and you never know what kind of ramifications are going to be handed down. That's what you have to be sensitive for, which is why under no circumstances can you defend it, even though I love me some Oakley.
There is a misinterpretation, I think, of why New York and Knicks fans love Charles Oakley, and he has a special place in the pantheon of New York, athletes all time in the hearts of New Yorkers. And it's not because he was a thug or an enforcer. Whether or not part of that is true, that those components actually exist, those aspects of his personality. The reason is he was a worker. He was an honest worker. He gave 100% all the time, no slack, both ends of the floor. And he wasn't a very good offensive player, but he was hustle all the time. People appreciate that, and they also appreciate the attitude, once again, Stephen A., right or wrong, and I'm excluding law enforcement from that. He shouldn't, but they like the attitude, the basic philosophy that's been missing from Madison Square Garden for a long time, that I don't care what the story is. I didn't do anything wrong. You are not putting your hands on me without repercussions. New York appreciates that, and they're rallying around Charles Oakley right now.
Go ahead, Molly.
Let's leave it there then. I'm on Team Barkley here, but it seems fitting to quote the great Mark Twain, never argue with the fool. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference. You get what I'm saying? This Charles Oakley incident at MSG clearly dominating the headlines this morning. So we want to hear from you guys. Who looks worse, Oakley or the Knicks? The guys making strong cases for both. Go on Twitter now and vote. We'll share those results a little later in the show. First Take just getting started. Coming up, after not getting a pass to Canton, Terrell Owens has gotten a ton of support, but one person still says the Hall of Fame made the right call. We'll tell you who that is a little later in the show. And Steph Curry has some choice words for our new president. Don't miss what the Warriors star said when First Take rolls on.